Now it's time to start a discussion about lambda expressions and higher order functions. But first I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to call it lambdas. I'm going to select Kotlin for the language, build system IntelliJ, make sure to have the JDK selected, and also I'm going to check this box to have the main function generated. Now let's delete the code inside the main function because we don't need this code. Let's hide the project pane. Now, what are higher order functions? If a function can accept functions as parameters, that is called a higher order function. If a function can return a function, that is also called the higher order function. If a function can do both, that is also called the higher order function. Now, what are lambdas? Lambdas are just functions without no name. And we're going to look at some examples with those. But first, let's create a function called add in the traditional way. So we're going to type here fun. Add is going to have two parameters, int, so it's going to be, they're going to be of type integer, and it's going to have a body, and it's just going to output in the console the sum of a plus b. So we're going to type here quotation marks, and we're going to put a plus b equals $, curly braces, a plus b. So this is gonna return, this is gonna output in the console the sum of a plus b. So if I call this function here add, and if I pass here two numbers 5 and 10, now if I run this, we'll get 15. So we get a plus b equals 50. So this is how we do it in the old way. Now let's see how we can achieve the same thing using a lambda function. So what I will do first is that I will first show you how to assign a lambda function to a variable. So I'm gonna type here val. I'm gonna call it my lambda. Now, to declare a lambda function, we just put curly braces. Then we need to type the parameters. I'm going to explain this immediately. So we put here a. I'm going to be an integer, b. So those are the parameters of our lambda function. Now I'm going to put dash and arrow, so the greater sign. And now I'm going to define the body of this function. So what comes on the right of the arrow is the body of this function. So we type print line, and we're going to put here a, let's actually put quotation marks, a plus b equals $, put curly braces, a plus b. Now, what we did here is we define a lambda function. So what is inside those curly braces, lambda function. Those are the parameters of the lambda functions, similar to what we have here. So what we have here is what we have here. Those are the parameters, and this is the body. This is the body of this function. So what we have here on the right of this greater on the right of this arrow is what we have inside here. So this is the body of this lambda function that we have here. So what we do is just print. We're gonna output on the console the sum of a plus b. Now I can call this lambda function now in my code. So if I type here, let's say my lambda. Now we put parentheses, and here we need to, as you can see, we have int and int. So I need to pass some parameters. So I'm gonna type here also 5. And 10. So let's actually put the different numbers. Let's put 8 and 9. Now, if you run this code, now we get a plus b equals 17. And this, we got this using our lambda function. So we did this not using our add function that we have here, but with our lambda function. And again, those are the parameters a and b, like we have here. And on the right hand side of this arrow, we have the body. So we have this. So we have the body of this lambda function. And we assign this lambda function to our variable my lambda, and we call that inside our code here, and it outputted 8 plus 9 is 17. So this is using a lambda function. And if you hover over this my lambda function, it says that val my lambda, and here you have the data type, what kind of type this function is. And we're gonna talk about this immediately. Now if you hover over my lambda, it says that you have a val my lambda, and you have colon int, and then you have the arrow sign, and you have this unit. So what is the meaning of this? So this is the type of this lambda function. So this is what the compiler inferred to be the type of this my lambda function assigned to my lambda variable. So here we have my lambda, and it takes two parameters of type int, and on the right here of this arrow it says unit, and this means that this function is not returning anything, so it's returning nothing. This is what this is the meaning of this. So similar to the way you have a variable here called text, and it's gonna be of type string, and we're gonna assign a text here. So similar to the way this variable has a type, and the type is string, in the same way this lambda function also has a type, and the type is those ints here, and and it has also this greater, it has this arrow and unit. So it's saying here that this function is going to take two integers and it's going to return nothing. So this is the type. So lambda functions have type, and the type for a lambda function can be inferred, as you can see here. We didn't declare here, we didn't put here colon int, and then dash greater sign unit. So we didn't type this explicitly here, because in the same way that this variable string can be inferred, so if you hover over here, it says that remove explicit type specification. In the same way, this lambda function can also be inferred to be of type int, and it's gonna return unit, because the compiler can figure out that. But there are scenarios where we need to specify the type of a lambda function, and we're gonna look at those. Now let's say that this add function that we have here is gonna take as one of its parameters a lambda function, and to do that we first need to define here that this is gonna take a lambda function. And to do that, we type here lambda, let's say, or we can choose another name, let's call it action. And here we need to specify the type, because now it can't infer the type, it can't figure out what type is, because don't have here an expression, don't assign here the actual function like we did here. And here it inferred the type because it looked on the right, and it saw that this is of type int, and it's gonna return nothing. Here we need to specify the type, so I'm gonna specify here, let's say this is gonna be an integer, and it's also gonna return nothing. So we put here dash greater than sign and the type unit. So what we say here, that this is gonna be a lambda function, is gonna take as a parameter one integer, and it's gonna return nothing. This is what we're saying here. And down here we're gonna call that, so we're gonna type action. Now we need to put parentheses the same way and you see now it's expecting an int, so we type here a plus b, right? Now if I delete this, let's say that I delete all of this code. Now if I type here add, now I need to pass two numbers. Let's say that I pass 5 and 10, and now we need to define here the lambda function, and we can define it like we have it previously by typing val my lambda, and we put equal, put curly braces, and here we're gonna define a parameter. It's gonna be of type int, and then we put what is gonna be the body of this lambda function, so we put dash greater than sign, and the body is gonna be just to output whatever that parameter is gonna be a in the console, so we type here a. Now we can assign that lambda function here to this parameter, my lambda. So type my lambda, so we assign to our parameter action, my lambda function that we created here, and we assign to this variable. So now if I run this code, we get 15. So this is correct. We get 15, and we did that by assigning my lambda function to my lambda to my action parameter that was defining, and this is going to be a lambda function. But what you can do with lambda functions is that, if the last parameter in the function or in the header of the class, in the constructor of the class is a lambda function, you can declare the lambda function outside. But first let's see how you can put it here. So what you can do, because this is an expression, we can delete this, and we can take this, press Ctrl C, and we can paste here directly this. So now if I run this, because this is an expression, now this is gonna be assigned to this action, my lambda, and it's gonna output 15. And we did this like this is similar to object that when you look at anonymous classes, because this now is also anonymous in the sense that we don't have here a name, so we don't assign this to anything, we just define it here, so it's an expression. So you get also 15. So now if I close this, what you can also do, if the last parameter in the function is a lambda function, and or if the last parameter in a constructor is also a lambda function, you can put the lambda outside the parentheses of that function or of that class. So what I can do here is I can delete those, and I can put here parentheses, and now I can press enter, and this is gonna work fine. So let's actually put it on the same line. So now as you can see, the lambda is outside the parentheses, not defined inside the parentheses like we did. Because if the lambda is the last parameter in a function or in the constructor of a class, it can be defined outside of that outside of the parentheses. So if it's the last parameter. So if I run this, now you'll get the same output. We get 15. So let's close this. Now let's see how we can change the code that we had when we talked about object expression with lambda functions. So I'm gonna delete this code, and now I'm gonna speed up now the things a little bit, because we're gonna add that code that we had previously in a previous video. So I'm gonna type class button. So this is the code that we had in the video when we talked about object expressions. Now I'm gonna create here the two buttons, val login button, it's gonna be a button, it's gonna have the login text, the ID is gonna be around the number, and here you need to type the on-click listener, and here I'm gonna type object, and gonna implement our on-click listener. So you need to click on this red bulb, implement members, and implement on-click. Now let's copy this, let's paste it here, and I'm gonna call this sign up. Now let's also change the ID. Now what we have here is that we have an object expression, we have anonymous classes, and by using the object keyword, and let's press Ctrl Alt format the code, and we implement that on-click function on this specific button, or for the login button and for the sign up button. But to do that, we use the object keyword, we implemented that from the interface, so override the interface here, and there is a shorter way to achieve the same thing using lambda functions, because our lambda functions and the code that we have here, respectively our object expressions, because object expressions and lambda functions are both expressions, so they can be assigned to a variable. We can define here a lambda function instead of the one-click listener interface, and we can pass a lambda function to our object, which is going to be created with this class, or to our object which are going to be created with this class. So I can delete the code that we have here. So I can delete this. Here also, I'm going to delete this code. Now what I can do is I can change this from a one-click listener to let's also call it one-click listener, but it's gonna be a lambda function. So let's define our lambda function, and here we're gonna put parentheses because this is not gonna take any parameters. Our one-click function doesn't have any parameters. Then we put dash, arrow, and gonna return unit. That means that this function is gonna return anything. So I'm gonna delete this. Now, because our lambda function is the last parameter inside the header of the class, we can define it outside. We can define it outside the parentheses. So I can put it here. So I can put here curly braces, and that's all. We have our lambda function there, and I can put here also. But if you hover over, we have this underline. So it says move lambda function argument out of parentheses. So let's click on this, and let's click on this also. So now, here we can add the code to log in the user if this button is clicked. So let's put a comment here, login user, and sign up the user. So these are, now we achieve the same thing that we had previously, respectively. We have a particular behavior when one button is clicked, when the login button is clicked, it's gonna execute the code inside this lambda function, and when this button is gonna be clicked, it's gonna execute this code inside the lambda function. And we did this now using the lambda function and not using the interface and the object keyword and implementing that. We did it by declaring our last parameter as a lambda function. Now let's actually look at Android Studio to see how Android Studio suggested us to change our code that we had for our buttons, the one-click listener that we had, to change our code from a object expression to a lambda function. So if I open Android Studio, as you can see, we have an underline here, and if you hover over, if you click on this yellow box, convert to lambda. So we can change that to a lambda. So now this was changed to a lambda function. And if you hover over this, it's also saying the same thing. So convert this to a lambda. So let's convert it to lambda, but let's put the code one line. So now we have the same code, that now we have the lambda. So this is the last parameter inside this function set on click listener, because it can be put outside the parentheses. So this is our discussion about lambda functions, and see you in the next video.